Bill, thank you so much for joining us today. On behalf of the Warren Alpert Foundation and the Warren Alpert Selection Committee, I want to thank you for helping us celebrate the award going to Wes Sundquist, Tomas Cihlar, and John Link. I'd like to start out with an overarching question, and that question is, do you think that lenacapavir is the game changer that we've all been waiting for?
Well, lenacapavir is a great new tool. It's not a tool that will bring the epidemic to an end, but there's a large group of patients that we think will be able to protect themselves with the initial product, which is the twice yearly, and then there's ongoing work that will get us the once per year form of lenacapavir, most likely in the next 3 years or so. So it will bring down the disease burden through prevention, and a fantastic new tool. It will still have people getting infected, and of course, we have a lot of people living with HIV, and even when they comply with their medicine, the negative health effects that they have to deal with.
I'd like to now move on to another question that has to do with cost. The cost of lenacapavir is quite staggering, measured in the thousands of dollars. On the other hand, the cost of goods is estimated to be in the tens of dollars. Could you share the roles that the Gates Foundation and other funders are playing in ensuring that licensing for generic production to lower costs is going to be achieved?
Yeah, so Gilead has a very generous policy that they make all the intellectual property available for use in the poorest countries without any royalty whatsoever. And so, the Gates Foundation has taken this product to generic manufacturers like Hetero, and over the next 2 years, they'll have a optimized way of making it that will bring the COGS down quite a bit. In the meantime, Gilead's providing some manufacturing capacity at something like $110 per patient per year for the poor countries. That's a purely break even, or they're probably losing some money on that. But then within 2 years, the generic production from people like Hetero and 2 others that we've made volume guarantees to will kick in. So then you'll have a $40 per patient per year. And then as they're working on their yearly dosing in parallel, we'll be working on the generic of that. And so if that goes well, we could probably get down to $25 per patient per year cost of goods for the drug.
$25 a year is really pretty remarkable, and hopefully we'll be able to achieve that. I'd like to move now to another question about equitable access and equitable distribution. Clearly, lenacapavir has the potential to have a huge impact on transmissions, but the question is, how do we accelerate and ensure equitable access and equitable distribution of the drug? And as part of that, the need for additional infrastructure, particularly given the recent cuts that have been made from donor countries really across the globe.
Yeah, so the HIV treatment is undergoing a very gigantic set of cutbacks from the rich countries that are not funding these activities at the same level. And so, even to be able to afford the medicines for the people who are HIV positive and to have the wraparound services, that's going to be very difficult. But at the same time, we want to reduce the number of new people getting infected by using tools like this one. The history here is that we've had daily dosing protection for a long time, things like tenofovir. And the uptake in certain rich country markets of that was actually pretty good. But in the places where you have most of the HIV, including in Africa, the daily dosing had very modest uptake. Then, we briefly had a product, fairly expensive product, which was a 2-month treatment called cabotegravir, which of course we funded all the trials for that, and we're getting the price of that down. That never really got to large numbers. So the big focus now that the approval of lenacapavir has come through, which is just fantastic, is to get there to be high uptake. And although we're not absolutely sure, we think that the twice yearly and eventually the once yearly, that say in South African townships, if we put the right funding on the delivery, that we could get very high uptake. We don't know that for sure, and we have to admit that the daily protection, we were over optimistic about the uptake we would see of that tool. But this tool is, dramatically easier. The stigma, the difficulty, going in twice a year is a lot easier than carrying pills around that will end up being quite visible, and that really had very low adoption.
Next, I'd like to ask you about how you see lenacapavir fitting in with the other drugs that are either available right now or coming online, like cabotegravir and like the new oral drug that the Gates Foundation has been helping Merck to develop, Merck 8527. How do you see those drugs affecting the calculus in terms of the role that lenacapavir will play?
Yeah, so another tool that's a little bit further down in the pipeline is the Merck oral preventative, which looks like it'll be monthly. And we think we can drive the cost of that down to probably $3 to $5. So that's going to come in and be complementary to lenacapavir. They're both really fantastic products. We're going to promote both of them very, very heavily. We're a funder of those Merck trials right now. Yeah. And they're also very good about working with us on the cost reduction pieces. So, I'd say Gilead and Merck are to be thanked, the great people there, for how they engage in helping with HIV in all of the poor countries. So if we get that uptake, you get less people getting infected, which is a gigantic thing. Eventually, some of these drugs in combination will actually lead to long-acting treatment options, not just long-acting prevention options. And so that treatment piece, may make it easier for patients and improve compliance of being on treatment and lower the cost of treatment, which would be very, very helpful at a time when we're experiencing these gigantic funding cuts.
I'd also like to ask you about vaccines and what your perspective is on the need for a vaccine and the need for continued investment in the development of an HIV vaccine. In 1984, it was estimated that we'd have an effective vaccine in 2 years, but now, decades later, obviously, we're still searching for an effective vaccine. What is your perspective on the need for a vaccine, given these long-acting agents that can prevent transmission?
Yeah, I'd say the most promising vaccine construct is the one that you and your group, looked at how to activate T cells, and working with partners like BioNTech. We hope we get that reduced to practice. That's not the only approach of taking your insight. There's another one going on in parallel with that. We have to be modest about our chance of success given the record here, but you can think of a vaccine as a preventative that lasts for a decade or lifetime. So that parameter, come and get it, maybe 1 shot, 2 shots, 3 shots, and then you're done for life. That's slightly better, and so the compliance and cost works out very, very well. And so certainly, your top people, the Gates Foundation, we're still feel the need for a vaccine and are, continuing to fund that very substantially. Right at the moment, the U.S. government's funding for that kind of work has also gone down a great deal. But, maybe we'll convince them to get that money back at some point.
I'd like to ask you now about another issue, and that is communicating science to the public. It seems that right now there just are incredible opportunities in terms of using science to improve global health. But it seems that science has lost some of its luster. What is it that we're doing wrong?
Well, this is a super exciting time in health discovery work, whether it's rich world diseases like cancer or Alzheimer's or obesity, or the diseases that affect the poor countries like malaria, a lot of HIV and tuberculosis. The basic insights we're having, the new drug modalities, the acceleration we're going to get from AI, people should be quite excited. And our belief that science can improve life, solve these very tough problems, and our admiration for the hard work that goes into these things should be at an all-time high. That's a bit clouded by misinformation, where understanding, okay, what have we really followed safety protocols, and are things very safe? We had a spike of skepticism and misinformation coming out of the pandemic. Whether or not that, represented a high and we'll go back to where we were pre-pandemic, or some element of the way political polarization and social networking work are going to mean we're always going to be at an elevated level of these misunderstandings, we don't know. Saying that something is safe and effective somehow is less exciting than saying that it's, there's a plot behind it, and that it's very, very dangerous. And so that's very tricky. It is the idea that we need to really study what's safe, and that some things have modest side effects that you really need to be open about. That's very, very clear. But when we have even, say, basic vaccination approaches being questioned, that certainly leads to people not getting vaccination. And although in the U.S. the deaths that result from that are pretty modest, because measles doesn't show up all that often and kids are pretty healthy, in developing countries, when you get rumors that reduce measles vaccination, you get many thousands of deaths. So weirdly, rich world vaccine skepticism actually has a much greater impact when it gets out to the countries that the Gates Foundation focuses on. And so we're finding local champions who are trusted, religious leaders. We have to up our game in terms of getting the truth to travel almost as fast as the crazy rumor.
You write a newsletter called The Optimist, and I think you frequently said that you're an optimist. I think right now we're all due for a dose of optimism. Can you share with us what you're optimistic about now?
Well, almost every problem that the Gates Foundation works on, better seeds for farmers, better livestock, better advice for farmers about weather and soil. Taking the latest AI tools and making them available so that this poor farmer in Africa has access to even better information than the richest farmer in the US has today, that is super exciting. Getting medical advice, in Africa, most people never meet what we call a doctor in the United States. And so the idea that as we get the reliability up, and we're funding support of all the African languages, so you can be talking with this simple feature phone and getting, great medical advice. If you combine those delivery challenges, which use AI, with the product innovation, better seeds, better livestock genetics, vaccines for HIV, TB, and malaria, which I do believe that, the question is it, 10 years or 15 years, I think we will have those phenomenal tools. And so, people have seen things like GLP-1 drugs. They've seen things like statins. Cancer, we make incremental progress, but there's so many new ideas that I think you could say are going to accelerate that. So gosh, science is working. The combination of basic research and the private sector will improve the human condition more in these next 20 years than any time in history. And if we put an equity lens on that and, encourage the smart kids that, you don't have to all go to Wall Street or, working on horizontal AI, you can, some of you can, join in on this health work. I'm very optimistic, and I'm surprised the awareness of that good news. Either people just don't know about it; it's overshadowed about the divisiveness that they run into, or the misinformation.
I completely agree. I wonder also if it's not that we as scientists are just not very good at communicating to the lay public. There's some work I think that needs to be done there, but I think there's also incredible opportunity. Thanks again, Bill, for joining us today and sharing your perspectives, helping us celebrate the Warren Alpert Prize. We really appreciate it.
No, it's always fun to talk to you, and the incredible innovation of great scientists like yourself make my work at the Gates Foundation really fulfilling, and allows us to share some very ambitious goals for the work.